Military man punched me over a fender bender, so I destroyed his life. I was working as a civilian with the US military overseas, and I lived off base in an apartment complex popular among the US military. One morning, I accidentally hit another soldier's vehicle. Upon exiting the vehicle, I noticed that both our vehicles were what you could call a hoopty. A hoopty is an old car that is pretty beat up and has been passed around from service member to service member, and they generally sell for $1,000 to $2,000. I also recognized that I was at fault for the accident. It was a very minor accident. His rear bumper was dented in slightly, but I could hear both of our cars still running. I approached the driver, who had already gotten out, and he was in uniform. I apologized and said if it was alright with him, I'd like to negotiate a payment. I will pay him in cash, and we don't involve the authorities. I wanted to keep this simple. I'll be honest, the accident was so minor that I honestly expected him to say, "Nah, man, it's good," but even if he wanted some money, I would have paid him. I have always been of the opinion that if you have a fender bender and can negotiate agreeable terms between both parties, it is best not to involve insurance or the police. He told me he wanted to call the police. I said we could call the police or we could go on base together, and I could give him $300. He said that wasn't enough. So, I upped my offer to $500. He proceeded to punch me in the face. It was a sucker punch. He got into his car and took off. And in the process, he nearly ran me over. Now, I had a black box in my car that recorded everything. I went to the provost marshal office on base, the military's police station, and reported the accident and the assault, and I showed the MP the footage. They used his license plate to track him down. I was also asked if I wanted to involve the local authorities or press criminal charges off base. Honestly, I felt like the soldier would learn his lesson if I let UMCJ, the military court, handle this. And I said, not at this time. I was told it was an option. The end result was that the soldier in question got 60 days of extra duty, a reduction in rank, and forfeited a portion of his paycheck. If only he had negotiated with me right there and then, this would have been the end of the whole ordeal. Honestly, at this point, I assumed our little ordeal was over. Well, a few days after his punishment was decided on, which was not long after the incident itself, I was in the commissary shopping when the soldier who assaulted me saw me and began to insult me. I told him he needed to calm down and that he should learn his lesson. He told me I was a pussycat who didn't know how to take a punch. I reminded him that I held back on destroying his life. He told me he's already been punished, and I can't touch him again. Then he left. A store employee witnessed the entire encounter, and I got the employee detail and reported this interaction to his command. His commander told me he had been ordered to not interact with me and that they would take action. His commander also recommended that I involve the local authorities since this soldier obviously isn't learning his lesson. So, I did. I contacted an attorney. The attorney was unsure if we could successfully sue the soldier and said he would need a cash payment to take the case. Honestly, I was mad, and I wanted to teach this guy a lesson. I agreed, and it was not cheap. To keep this story short, we ended up in a court off base. We presented our evidence. The soldier in question had decided to represent himself. He had outbursts several times in court. The judge ended up granting me a judgment of approximately $50,000. When the judgment was given, the soldier called the judge a bitch and said that the army would cover for him. So, the judge changed his judgment to $80,000, and the judge then asked me if I also wanted to press charges against this soldier in criminal court. Honestly, it was obvious this guy wasn't going to learn a lesson. I told the judge I wanted to pursue criminal charges in addition to the judgment. My lawyer later advised me that if I ever wanted to see the money, I should pursue an international hold. With my judgment, it is likely that a judge would grant me an international hold. An international hold is basically where this soldier would not be allowed to leave the country until I was paid my $80,000. Also, he told me that according to the agreement between the US military and the host country, the US military would honor the international hold. Basically, the US military would not protect him or move him out of the country to avoid punishment. Honestly, by this point, I had paid my lawyer thousands of dollars, and I honestly didn't feel like paying thousands of dollars and getting nothing for it. So I said, yes, I want to go forward with the international hold. About a month later, the international hold was granted, and the US military was informed of this. 2 months later, the criminal case was over, and the soldier was sentenced to 90 days in jail. By this point, the soldier had been moved onto the base and into his barracks by his commander. I remember the day I was informed that the MPs handed him over to the local authorities to begin his 90-day jail sentence. Did I mention he still owed me $80,000? I heard nothing for a year, and then one day I got a call from his commander. His commander wants me to make a statement in regards to the case. I go in and make the statement. During the statement, I found out that the US military was in the process of churning the soldier out of the US military. The commander also informed me that he was close to coming up with the money to pay me so he could have the international hold lifted. The commander also asked me if my lawyer would be willing to make a statement. I contacted my lawyer, who also made a statement about the facts of the case. A few weeks later, his ex-wife contacted me. When this all started, I knew he was married, so I guess his wife decided to divorce him. She informed me that his ex-husband had the money and needed the details on how to pay me. I provided her with the details. And a few days later, I got the payment and contacted his ex-wife to inform her that I had been paid. She then asked me to send a receipt so he could have the international hold lifted and return to the States. I asked her how he got the money. She said he maxed out his credit and also had family help out. Also, during this conversation, I found out the army had chaptered him out of the military. I sent her the receipt, and that was the last I ever heard from his side. I took his $80,000, bought myself a brand new car, and used the rest of the money to put down on an investment property.